So I finally played Halo Infinite, and the soundtrack is stuck in my head constantly like it's 2001 all over again. That blood-pumping, iconic music that will forever be stuck in the minds of us naughties gamers, and blasting cheeky grunts and brutes along the way is as awesome as ever. Halo's gunplay here in Infinite has been refined, and it is the best it has ever been, without sacrificing the simplicity of it all that makes the series so accessible. It's punchy, surprisingly strategic, and has a new layer of creativity with some small but impactful changes to the gameplay formula. For example, the grapple hook adds a form of mobility that I never knew was missing from this series and would now feel unnatural without it. This mechanic can also be used in combat itself to zip towards enemies, greeting them with the business end of your fist. Pick up weapons, explosive canisters to throw back. I mean, the motion is seamless and adds so much swag to the Chief's skills. Such a basic idea that, to be honest, seems to be becoming a trend in first-person shooters, but it changes enough to feel fresh. The enemy AI is well programmed with enemies flanking you, especially on harder difficulty. Some of these guys are absolutely ferocious. I fucking hated these charging arseholes with a passion, but every time I killed one I would have this internal victory. The level design in terms of its gameplay and combat encounters allowed for you to step one up on the enemy if you are paying attention to your surroundings. The assortment of weapons is great with different bullet types as well. You have your standard ammo for machine guns and shotguns, to plasma rifles for shield wielding cowards. I particularly like the shock rifle and the stalker sniper rifle for taking out the trash from afar. But what perhaps I think Halo Infinite does best is, well, what it avoids doing with its biggest diversion from the series norm yet. As soon as I heard Halo Infinite was moving to the open world formula, my first thought was,
oh shit. Here we go again.
Big open worlds don't always mean better games. Some of my favourite franchises have been tarnished because of the sacrifices developers make to the identity of a franchise in the transition to becoming huge open world epics. However, Halo Infinite does not fall into this trap because open world I use as a loose term, and what the developers have created here is what I like to call a working man's open world. What do I mean by that? I'm glad you asked. But first things first, look, a lot of the time Halo Infinite did feel like a filler episode of something far grander than it presents here. The plot is your basic bitch trying to take over the world with his excessively excessive monologues, with a motive that has about as much depth to it as a country road pothole in the world that has the potential of the Grand Canyon.
The UNSC lost this war months ago. Your people are broken, scattered, hunted, defeated. We are one step ahead, always. Set a fire in your heart, Spartan. Bare your fang.
2 hours later.
I grew weary.
They attempt to do the now ever so popular father figure plot device that has been done far better in the games it tries to replicate, with an ending that didn't see me anywhere near as inclined for a sequel as it should for a game that is looking to revamp a 2-decade-old series. The game world, visually, by around the halfway point, is about as interesting as a 5-hour lecture on why the sun will rise tomorrow, with the variety of options you have when determining whether the sun will set. Basically, what I'm saying is the external environments as you explore the open world get repetitive fast with their constant forests and enemy bases that all have the same design aesthetically, but none of this gets as repetitive as quickly as the interior level designs. Don't get me wrong, they do look cool and have a very Halo look to them with their shiny advanced otherworldly structures, but even the architecture of your mum's ensuite bathroom would get boring to look at after the 10th time firing my load. When I first fired up the game I was convinced that the map it presented me with was just a starting one, and that as I progressed through the story I would be taken to other hub areas, smaller open worlds. Perhaps snow-covered landscapes, deserts or cities, especially after the multiplayer section of the game launched prior to the campaign, which had a far wider range of settings within its selection of multiplayer maps. But none of those are seen here in the campaign, and this one map alone is what you get, and this is kind of where I loved Halo Infinite for a reason I didn't expect to. To finish the campaign of this game with a lot of side content along the way, it took me around 15 hours. I don't know about you, but there are so many games that pile on top of my unfinished backlog, and these usually consist of large open world games that have an incredible amount of real estate to cover with an even bigger amount of filler side content. Granted, a lot of this stuff is optional in those types of games, but if you are anything like me, then I can't rest until every pixel of the map is uncovered with every side quest, activity, collectible, or whatever collected. Yeah, it's a freaking curse. But what made Halo Infinite so enjoyable for me was it had all of this stuff, but it was neatly packed into a manageable map. That there was always something to do, yet it never felt like simple filler like it would in a lot of other games. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all open world games are filled with boring, uninspired bullshit. Some of the greatest games of all time are open world extravaganzas, but I think it is also hard to deny certain tropes have been passed down the generations, from say the early Far Cry or Assassin's Creed games for example, haven't been shaken up in a drastic way in many cases to make them feel unique. In fact, I recently played Far Cry 6 and it was such a fat package with the amount of content that was packed in there, but after a good amount of time with the game I felt a lot of that package was filled with nothing but fun sucking sponge, unlike the desired package stuffed with prime beef. I guess what this boils down to for me is I'm a strong believer in quality over quantity, and sometimes less is more. With franchises becoming more and more about ticking hundreds of boxes on a map, I guess Halo Infinite for me was just pretty refreshing in the sense that it wasn't a convoluted, soulless game that lost my interest around 30 hours in because I'm taking over the 22nd base in a game. Despite moving to a, again, I hesitate to call an open world structure, it didn't take all of my time, and in the way it was laid out, I didn't have to spend hours traversing a lifeless setting getting from my desired point A to B. We do have a number of activities to clear in the game if you look to go outside the main story. You got legendary enemies to take out to obtain special weapons, FOB bases scattered around the map that need purging of Covenant remains that have sided with the new threat, and soldiers in need of support. I mean, you name it. If you've done it in an open world game, it's probably here in Halo Infinite, but the difference here is everything is just ready for you. In a time in which I'm not always able to play games for hours on end anymore, the progress I would make in 30 to 60 minutes of gameplay with clearing the map and completing missions would reflect that of a few hours in other games. Being able to jump into a game for a short period of time without being left with the feeling of it wasn't really worth it was pretty good with this. Before you call me out on it, I did say Halo Infinite itself feels like a filler episode in the Halo universe, which, yeah, did leave me feeling a little underwhelmed at the end of it. But what was there was a blast to play because it was just so action-packed from beginning to end, without being bogged down by repetitive and grindy shit. I guess you could just say, I hate what Ubisoft games have become and this was just a long-ass way of saying it.